IT compliance in the UK. So there's lots of different types of compliance that you need to adhere to, but it really depends in what sector and industry you work in. And often, sometimes the compliance is actually daisy chained. So you yourself might be compliant or need compliance because of other vendors that you're using, or maybe other customers that you're supplying. So it really is important that you understand what compliance you need to adhere to. So when we say compliance, it's whether it's a legally binding thing or whether it's more of a guideline. So for example, GDPR, you as a business need to be compliant with. If you're not, you'll be breaking the law and you could then get fined, but also you may not be able to work in the sectors in the industry that you're currently working in. So that is an overarching law. Whereas something like Cyber Essentials, that's not a legally compliant thing, that's more to do with a self-governed benchmark. So that's something that companies might opt to do, and the reason you'd opt to do it is because maybe one of your customers is asking or is a requirement for everyone that they use to have Cyber Essentials. Also, for legal reasons, you've got things like the Data Protection Act. This is how you use data and how you protect people's data. So this is a legally binding thing. You need to make sure that you're using and storing data in the correct way. Whereas something like ISO accreditation, that's not a legally binding thing. You're not going to get sued if you're not ISO, but you may get struck off of the ISO register if you're not compliant. And a big part with ISO is more around the fact of you having a baseline and then improving on that baseline every time you're recertified, usually every 12 months. This is where it's understanding what's legally bound to do, or whether it's just something that you should be doing for the certain body that you want to be compliant with. So what do you need to do to become compliant? First of all, it's starting off with a full IT audit. Now this can sound quite in depth, and honestly it is, because it really covers everything to do with the IT and then the data that's stored within that network. So for example, you may store certain types of sensitive data, credit card information for example. If you're, say, in an industry where you need to hold people's credit cards, maybe a restaurant or a hotel. So if you're holding someone's data, you then need to prove that you're holding it in a safe and secure environment. So this is where certain compliance and certain audits will take place so that you can prove that you are storing it how it's recommended. Because if the worst happens and you get hacked, then you'll be covered because you're compliant. Whereas if you're not compliant and you get hacked, there'll be no insurance and you won't be covered. So the liability will fall back onto you. So there's so many different ins and outs of what compliance is, what do you legally need to do. But first of all, you start with a full IT audit. And this is an audit in terms of your devices, anything, whether it's yours, whether it's cloud-based. And then we go into the world of who owns the data. Is it you as an individual or a business, or is it the company that's holding the data? And then it comes into where's the sovereignty of the data. If you're a UK business and you've got all of your data in America, for example, and then there's some legality to do with the data, who is in charge of it? If it's being held in America, the UK police have no jurisdiction of that data. So that's a big issue. Whereas if you're using an American provider, but you state that you want it in a UK stored data center, then that keeps the sovereignty in the UK, and that's the important bit. So this is where first of all you need to do a full audit, then you need to understand what the compliance is that you need to adhere to. As I said earlier, this can be quite complicated, but you don't necessarily need to do it manually. You just need to partner with a company that's got the right tools that can do a really in-depth scan and understanding of the entire IT network. This is your devices, your servers, whether they're yours or hosted, but also then all the software that you're using, whether it's absolute software that you use or whether it's software that is just keeping devices safe and secure. And just a final point, because this is quite a detailed topic and we'd be more than happy to help you with any questions and issues that you may have. But finally, this also links into anyone that is connected to your business. Contractors, for example. If they work for your business and they're using your data, it's then making sure that they comply with everything that you need to. So just be really careful with that. Often it's those outliers that you might not be sure of whether you do need to include them. If in doubt, you do need to include them, but maybe a bit more in depth looking into it, you might be able to ring fence what they look at, and then that would make the compliance much easier. So compliance can be a really tricky thing, but Syn-Star make it super easy. We've invested in some of the best tools around so that we can do automated compliance testing, and we can also understand which benchmarks you need to hit, and then we'll make sure the process is super easy, even though behind the scenes it's a pretty complex thing. But this is what we do. So if you'd like to discuss how Syn-Star can help you with an initial free audit, then please click on the link.